Hello, and welcome back to Health Without the System. I'm Dr. Tim Scott.
My name's Mia Scott, guys. Welcome back.
Yeah, so it seems just a few minutes ago we were chatting with the audience.
Yeah.
But so today we have a cool episode. You go ahead. You talk about it.
So today is about glucose, which is our body's main source of fuel. So this is a very important topic because it's one of those things that, not enough is a terrible thing and too much is a really bad thing. So it's gotten, really popular in our standard American diet of glucose, sugar, and we're going to talk about what that means to the body.
Yeah. I mean, so at its baseline, glucose, right? It's a simple sugar. It's the primary source of energy for your body and specifically your brain. Your brain really likes glucose, right? So you need it. You're always going to need it. And if you kind of look at everything we talk about in our previous podcasts, we sort of mentioned doing things like, what would your great-grandmother have done? Your great-great-grandmother have done? What about our ancestors, like an ancestral diet? And what you have to look at in the context of glucose throughout our podcast today, and when you go to look at foods in the future, is the amount that we consume and the forms that we consume it in today compared with our ancestors.
Yeah, and today it's very clear that the majority of people in the standard American diet are just flooding their cells with glucose, which can lead to dysregulation, hormonal disruption, metabolic issues such as diabetes, high cholesterol, fatty liver. It goes on and on.
Brain fog, inflammation, but even like some of these mood disorders, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it affects, everything in your body is interconnected. This is something that frustrates me a little bit about traditional Western medicine is I work in the emergency department. We've said it many times. Someone will come in and will have a problem with their kidneys and they'll say, okay, I gotta go talk to my kidney doctor. And a problem with their heart. All right, I'm going to make an appointment with my heart doctor. And your back, you see your back doctor. And I feel like we pretend these things don't talk. And if you speak to a cardiologist, they might say, oh, that's a kidney problem. I don't handle that. But it's like all these things are connected. And the reason I bring this up is because everything is connected. I mean, our brain, our heart, our kidneys, our liver. When you're having dysfunction and inflammation in your blood vessels, in your kidneys, it's happening in your heart too. It's happening in your brain. It not only is it increasing your risk for kidney disease or heart disease, but also some of the neurodegenerative disorders we've spoke about on previous podcasts, like dementia, Alzheimer's disease. So it's just all interconnected.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, these specialties are absolutely needed, but they're not taught to also look at the bigger picture, zoom out a little bit and look at the patient as a whole. Yes, it's great to know a lot about an organ, but it's also very good to know what are the relationships with everything else. So, for instance, you have somebody who comes in with chronic constipation or GI issues or mental health issues, and we know that the gut talks directly to your brain. And, PCP will see them do some labs and say, your labs look within range, everything looks great. And then they go to a GI specialist and said everything looks fine, when really their constipation is a thyroid issue. And it's like there's so many missed parts of this where your body is an entire system. It's not just, separated from everything else. So it's easy to get lost in that. But glucose can wreak havoc on every single organ of our body because every cell uses glucose. And when we flood those cells, things can go really south.
Definitely. So in 1822, the average American consumed 2 teaspoons of sugar per day. What do you think? I mean, just an estimate. What do you think that's at nowadays? I don't have a stat in front of me.
Well, from what they say, it's very under from what we think. So just repeat that in your head. So up to 2 teaspoons a day is what the average person consumed way back then. 1 can of Pepsi is 10 teaspoons.
10 teaspoons.
10 teaspoons.
In one can
just
of
one
Pepsi.
can of Pepsi. So if you're having just 1 pop a day, which obviously we're not recommending, that's
5 times more than what the average
for
person
their entire
consumed.
day.
Yeah.
And then that's just your drink for your meal. What did you have at your meal? Which is for sure going to have added sugars and processed carbs and probably little protein, not very much protein, which is going to spike your glucose even more. So you can see over generations, how poorly not only the food system, but just dysregulation of everything. I mean, it wasn't too long ago, they had McDonald's and pop and everything in hospitals, and some still do have pop. And so we can see the trends of where things are going, and there's no wonder why we are quite literally the sickest.
Oh, I can't tell you how many times I'm working a shift in the emergency department and somebody goes out to the vending machine and grabs a Pepsi and a bag of, flaming hot fries and comes on back in. And it's a head scratcher, but I'm not mad at people. I'm mad at the system. I'm mad at the food, big pharma. When I get angry at things, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah.
Okay. So talking about blood sugar, right? So we need this glucose. Our cells need glucose. Our brain needs glucose. We have a very important hormone, insulin, which helps us regulate that. And insulin is produced by beta cells in the pancreas. So insulin helps, drive that glucose into cells, but the cells have to be receptive to the insulin in order for it to get in there. If blood sugar gets too high, that can cause problems. If blood sugar gets too low, that can cause problems. Our body inherently is very good at mediating that. But over time, we can sort of screw that up with decisions that we make.
Sure. And to kind of piggyback off that with insulin, that's actually one of my, I feel like my most interesting topics that I love about the body, because it really does try to do everything it can to make us homeostatic, to make us regulated the best it can. But of course, as anything, it can only handle too much until it's just done. And that's one of the markers that we do here at Wreaks Health. We love looking at a fasting insulin. Why? Because that will tell you how hard your body is to work at working to keep that glucose regulated. So for example, you can have a normal fasting glucose. And when I say normal, it won't flag until 101 or 110 for your providers, depending on the lab that you get it drawn at. But nonetheless, you can have it be normal and a normal A1C, but your fasting insulin is through the roof. And what that's saying is, listen, your body is trying to compensate. So imagine your house as your cell, right? And your insulin is like at the door, and your insulin has a key holder and is the only person who can let that glucose into the cell. And you just took a big meal in, and that glucose is just circulating around your house, trying to get inside. And the insulin will say, sure, come on in, and we'll open it up and we'll let the glucose into your cell. Well, what happens is when we have a ton of glucose circulating because of, Pepsi and things that we're eating and taking hits to the body, your insulin will start to create more and more, saying, we have to get all this glucose into the cell because there's too much. And it will try and it'll raise insulin up to try to push that glucose into the cell until it just can't compensate anymore. And your cells can go oversaturated, which then that will get stored as fat in different areas of your body. And then your fasting insulin can no longer support that. So then it will, start to drop. And then you can have the diabetes and all those things. So it's just a snapshot into your life of what is actually going on with your body. Is it trying to compensate? And it tells a different story. But nonetheless, like every single meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, if you're continuing to overload your body with glucose, your fasting insulin, it's only going to do so. Your insulin is only going to do so much before it can no longer do its job, which is obesity, fatty liver.
And you're mentioning that perfectly, because that's why you have to have an eye on some of these labs. And we spent an entire podcast talking about being able to look at these labs yourself, and you have to be able to notice trends because we're not always picking them up as providers. And Mia said when your fasting glucose is creeping, when it's creeping above 90, you should be taking a look at your diet. When it's hit 95, you should know you are on your way to insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. You're not always going to get a fasting insulin level from your provider. That's not just like a commonplace one, but it's something you could definitely ask for. And again, it's included in our panels here at Wreaks Health because we really do just believe in catching things before they happen. I'm kind of talking about that a little bit. So why is it bad? Why don't we want excess amounts of glucose floating around in our bloodstream? And how is it, sort of ruining cellular metabolism? Not to get too scientific, but just so our listeners kind of understand what's happening. So, first off, I like to think of, I heard a provider say this before and it's stuck with me, no pun intended, glucose is sticky, right? So I always think of glucose like when I get sticky on my fingers, if you have some marshmallow or caramel or something, and that's exactly what glucose is doing in the body. It sort of caramelizes things. It stickies things up. It gums things up. And when it's in the bloodstream, one of the things you can get are what's called AGEs, or advanced glycosylated end products. And these are basically just different proteins, collagen, whatever it is in your body that has a glucose sort of stuck to it. This is why we can actually measure a 90-day supply of your glucose in a hemoglobin A1C, because the glucose will stick to red blood cells. So these advanced glycosylated end products, can be damaged, and they can do damage in and of themselves. They can damage vessel walls. And that's how, when you start to think about these things, as you get down to tinier microscopic levels, that's how you get damaged long-term. Vessels of the eyes, vessels of the heart, vessels of the kidneys. And let's not forget reproductive organs, especially in males. You have to think about that. Those need good blood flow over time to keep working at a healthy age. So that's what's happening in the blood. What's happening within the cells? You like to talk about mitochondria, and I like to talk about those too.
Yeah, it's just inflammation. You overload that. And it's interesting that he said that, because I remember when I used to work in the ER as well, and we would do these lab draws on our patients that were uncontrolled diabetes or like a DKA or something. And you'd go, because in the ER, we could just draw off their line, and you would pull back and it would be like drawing syrup out from them. And you would just know right there that you're like, oh, their glucose is going to be through the roof, because it was so viscous. You couldn't even, it would plunge back in the plunger. It was so thick. And that's your body. So that's in your entire body. And it's like a sluggish. Just imagine like a snail trail in your body. It's just hard. Everything is harder to move and to your cells to do its job. And what Tim was saying at a cellular level, when you have this glucose that is just really trying to get in your cells and your cells are too full, they get dysregulated. They get inflamed, they can't function. And that's why when you have too much glucose, you can feel this weird, that brain fatigue or that crash. And the same thing when you're hypo and you have too little, blurred vision, doubled vision, you can get these things because that's your energy of your cells. So if it can't function the way it's supposed to be, whether too much or too little, you almost immediately feel these side effects. Imagine last time you had a meal when you felt like you could immediately fall asleep right after that carb crash, that glucose spike, and you just feel like I could sleep this second. That is your body like saying, whoa, this is too much, for the cells, and you will immediately feel that.
That'll also
very
increase,
responsive.
yeah, that'll increase your cortisol levels as well, and now you're affecting other axes.
And the drop that happens after.
Right, and we've spoken in the past about mitochondria, right? Mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. And, you like to think of mitochondria as an engine, and when engines run, it produces byproducts or waste. And the mitochondria are no different, and those are, in the form of free radicals, which our body needs to be able to neutralize so that they don't do damage. If the engine is in overdrive, right? If we're just shoving glucose into the cells, into the mitochondria, trying to kick out more ATP, if the body's in overdrive, the engine will go in overdrive for a while, but it's going to keep kicking out waste. So now imagine you have this engine, it's getting gummed up by all this glucose, and it's kicking out an excess, way too much exhaust for your body to process, and now these free radicals start to do damage too. That's sort of just an idea to give you how the cell's getting overrun and how that's going to lead to damage further on down the line. And so to me, when we talk about mitochondrial dysfunction, oxidative stress, that's one of the keys to understanding that. And glucose can definitely lead to all of those things. Excess glucose.
Yep. And once again, if you listen to our podcasts in the past, you'll realize that when we say disease processes, inflammation is at bay, and the inflammation can trigger whatever. And like I said, for him, that might be diabetes. For me, that might be dementia, which is perfect for this podcast because this topic on glucose, they are now finding, and this is over the last, five, maybe 10 years or so, that we're using the term type 3 diabetes as our dementia patients. And that is a dysregulation of glucose that is getting into the brain, inflaming the brain, these tau proteins, which are, the directly linked to the Alzheimer's and things like that. But glucose is so very important in a perfect dose amount. Like we said many times, too much, too little, that can be a really bad issue for your body. I agree. I feel like a little bit more that the too much is a problem because, hypoglycemia can be an emergency really quickly where your body is never going to maintain that low state for long. You'll have a syncopal episode and you can, obviously die from that. But in a hyper, your body can really try to compensate for months, years, like decades, and it really tries to work hard. And by that time, you have fatty liver, you have issues shuttling around your glucose, high, A1C, inflammation of the cells. You might just feel like crap. And these are the things that we can see where your body can actually last a lot longer trying to compensate a hyper versus a hypo. And it's a huge problem right now.
I completely agree with that. And, also obviously with what we do at Wreaks Health and just really when we talk to our family, our friends, and when I talk to patients in the ER, we focus incredibly hard on metabolic health. We take care of a lot of patients for weight loss, weight management, but we always start with metabolic health because focusing on your metabolic health, improving your diet, improving these processes in your body, your mitochondrial energy production, your body dealing with waste, getting rid of toxins. A byproduct of that is weight loss, weight maintenance, improved fatigue, improved thyroid function, improved hormone levels. Like everything comes back to your diet and the metabolism. And so it's ever so important that one of the most important things like glucose is one that you understand and are in control of. Now your body does a great job. Mia said, assuming you're not a type 1 diabetic, or have an insulin production issue, your body does a great job of regulating it until it can't anymore. And if you abuse it for long enough, it's going to get to the point where it can't. So this is a really good time, no matter where you're at in your life. I was talking to a cousin of mine that I'm helping take care of. She's 27 years old, and I was reminding her, like, you're kind of just ending that point in your life where you don't worry so much about what you eat. It's whatever, I'll eat anything. My metabolism's great. I'm not gaining weight. But what you're not thinking about is maybe your metabolism's great, but you're working your body hard. Your body's working really hard to burn that glucose, to process those seed oils. And over time, you're going to feel those effects. What you do in your 20s and in your 30s and in your 40s is definitely setting the stage for any chronic disease, problems, or the way you feel in your 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Yeah. And we see that it doesn't take too long with even healthy individuals. I get all the time patients that come to us, they'll already have a base set of labs that they can upload before even seeing us. So for example, perfect story when they say, hey, I'm going to upload my labs. I got these done 6 or 8 months ago. They were normal and they actually didn't look too bad. They get to me and they're like, I have been really feeling bad the last few months. I just don't feel myself, brain fog, fatigue, can't sleep, whatever. And I get my labs done and they are a really big difference from when they were just 6 months ago or 8 months ago. And they're like, I haven't been trying. Like I didn't care what I ate. I really fell off the bandwagon. Drinking a lot, fast food. And these are patients that are 30s, 35. And it does not take long to develop the metabolic issues very quickly. And one of my favorite sayings is if you eat the standard American diet, you can't be surprised when you get standard American diseases. So this goes back to the saying that if you're not trying to do everything that you can to make your healthier lifestyle and healthier options and really being aware and educated on what you're eating, you're going to get these disease processes sometime in your life.
Absolutely. So let's focus on some things that are pretty easy to do to change whatever story you're writing right now. So first and foremost, we've said this in previous podcasts. So when you get glucose, you want to get it in its most natural form and hopefully with fiber, right? So let's talk a little bit about some things to avoid, some ways that we can eat to help our body out, and really what we can do to regulate this without medications or anything, just the old-fashioned way. Can I say first and foremost, high fructose corn syrup, right? Like it's everywhere. That's a big no. Yeah. Eliminate it. Eliminate it from your diet.
From your children's diet.
Not even in moderation. Sure, if you're at a big event once a year. I will admit it because I never want people to think I think I'm perfect. I bought a Coca-Cola. It was
that weird flavor
I love orange vanilla flavored things, and I saw an orange vanilla Coca-Cola the other day, and I bought it. And
it's still sitting in the fridge.
It's still sitting in the fridge. I've had a couple sips. I will admit, it's like delicious, but it's gross. But anyway, my point is not even in moderation. Now, we really have trained our taste buds to the point, I've said this in previous podcasts, I would much rather have an apple with peanut butter and raisins than I would rather have a Snickers bar. Like, it just sounds gross to me. But high fructose corn syrup, first and foremost, it's very easy. High fructose corn syrup. So fructose is a big discussion in the wellness world. There are some people who say there's no place for it in your diet. Other people argue that when you get it in fruit with fibers that come in fruit, that's going to delay the absorption and it's okay. I'm personally of a person where if you eliminate high fructose corn syrup, which is a completely unnatural form, I do not see any problem with most people getting fructose from fruits in normal ways in your diet. So I'll just we're not going to elaborate on that more. I'm going to say fruits are okay. We are huge advocates of single ingredient, whole, unprocessed foods, fruits and vegetables, organic if you can. If you can't, clean them really well. So I'm okay with that. But high fructose corn syrup, there's no room for in your diet.
Yeah, really, it's not super hard to live a diet that's not very much of added sugar. It really is not. And I do that every single day. And once you train your taste buds to do that, it becomes significantly easier. And it's not even your taste buds, it's your gut microbiome. So the more processed food that you eat, the more of the bad gut bacteria that you keep alive, those are the ones that are continuing to also signal from your brain to your gut, hey, we need more of this, I want a sugar craving, and all the things that lead you down an entire bag of chips. So there's things like that where you can just really start to change your gut microbiome over time where you're not even going to crave these foods. And I can say that there is very few, if any, meals per week, not even per day, per week that I eat that is added sugar. And it's just natural to us now in the way that we eat. Now, that's not for everyone of a ripping the Band-Aid off. It's a slow approach that took me a while to get to where I am. But now, if I have something sweet, I will have one bite of something and it's too rich and that's it. That's all I need. I can't eat a entire cupcake. And if I do, it's like I feel terrible. And it's things that will just change over time.
And you feel terrible, most likely from that glucose spike,
yes.
Right? You're feeling that glucose. You've trained your body. And then on the flip side of that, not only are you going to feel terrible on the way up, you're going to crash on the way down.
Yep. And if you want your sugar, you have it more of a natural way. So for instance, in the summer's coming up, I love to do a bowl of just organic Greek yogurt. I put no sugar, nothing added in the actual yogurt. Yes, if you eat it plain, it tastes like sour cream, which is why I got to add to it. So I will do like my fruits and so like raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, and I'll do a little bit of a mash in it. Smash them down to make it like a fruity yogurt. And then I will do a little bit of granola and maybe just either a drizzle of honey or peanut butter. And that's it. And that's high in protein and that's very sweet for me. That's all I need. Sometimes you can do some cacao nibs, which are the dark chocolate. Those are significantly healthier for you. And you can have your sweet treats. It's the really processed stuff, like the can of Coke that's 10 teaspoons full. That's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and we do use sweeteners in our house. We use organic maple syrup as a sweetener, and we use local honey.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of things we sweeten with, and I'm telling you what, it does just fine.
Yeah,
It does just fine. So this is the one, I really want to make sure we focus on this for a minute. This is where it hides, right? It hides in foods. Things you would never expect to have high fructose corn syrup, And if you're not into reading labels yet, or you're maybe just starting your journey, you have to look at everything, because I'm sure this one's more common to people, but when I first started, I would never have dreamed that pasta sauce or ketchup had high fructose corn syrup. And the most common brands of both of them do.
Yep. And there's alternatives without it. Like our ketchup is just like the vegetable based one. It's not even, I mean, it's tomatoes, but they put other stuff in it like carrots, and our kids love it. They have no idea it's a different form of ketchup. No added sugar whatsoever. Because I think I don't know if they add a little bit of fruit in there, but it tastes like normal ketchup. You made ketchup the other day. We were out and you just do tomato paste and some Worcestershire and whatever. What else did you do? Vinegar. There's just ways to do it without sugar. You don't need this. So once you start looking at your food, another example is peanut butter. Why is peanut butter having sugar in it? It shouldn't. It's just peanuts and salt. That's it. And when you really start to decrease that sugar load every single day, you will have better sleep. You will feel less inflamed. You'll have less brain fog. Of course, you'll decrease your risk of every single metabolic disease that we always talk about. And it's just making those changes. And I've done some videos like this, I think they're on YouTube, of showing you how much true sugar is in like a jar of jelly. I mean, that thing, when I dumped out the jar of jelly and put in how much sugar was in there, it would have an inch left to spare. The whole entire thing was sugar. And it's, you don't need that. You can make jam without sugar from home. So just finding those better options, and it just makes a world of difference for your family.
Exactly. High fructose corn syrup, first and foremost, you got to get that out. Second is adding,
Added sugar,
please be very careful what you're adding when you cook, when you bake. Like I said, we use very little, if any. A lot of times we use more of the natural sweeteners. But cut it. There are so many recipes as I've been experimenting and cooking and doing high protein meals and stuff. It might say 2 cups of sugar I do a protein banana bread sometimes, and it might say 2 cups of sugar. I've put in a 1/4 cup of sugar, just to give it a little sweet, and it's been fine. And we've cut it down even less than a 1/4 cup. I mean, when I do it now, it's probably that little tiny baby round thing if I put sugar in it.
Yep.
But anyway, point is drastically move towards removing it. And same with your kids. So people always come back to, there's no way my kid's going to eat that. There's no way my kid's going to eat that. Well, I'm sorry, but your kid will eat it. When they get hungry, they will eat. And our kids have complained, when we've given them sweets before, we give them Giggles instead of Skittles.
They love those.
They still have sugar, but they're dye-free. It's a drastically reduced amount.
Sugar.
No high fructose corn syrup. And now our kids get super excited when I let them have Giggles. They don't even care about Skittles anymore. I mean, it was like 2 times where they felt weird for Giggles.
Yeah,
and
they don't even.
Same with, you can make your own popsicles at home. I mean, listen, we're not trying to lay out an entire diet plan here. It's just like, this stuff is sustainable. You have to make the initiation. You have to make the moves, and you have to stick with it. Your taste buds will change. Your kids' taste buds will change. Or if they're young enough, mold them early. We've mentioned our youngest has probably reaped the most benefits. Our 2 youngest, but our youngest specifically, who walks around eating grass-fed beef organs.
Yeah, beef and heart. She asks for a stick every morning now. She goes right to the bag and wants to chomp on some beef liver and heart, which is fine. It's great. No sugar. But it just, once again, back to the basics. And I get this can be so hard for kid snacks. But if you follow us on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or wherever that you follow us on, you can see that I do some of these videos like a pantry walkthrough, where I can show you where if your kids really like a fruit roll-up, there's a healthier version without sugar, where it's quite literally just fruit.
You can
dried
also
up,
make
rolled
those
up. Yes, you can.
easy.
Dehydrate them. Yep. So there's ways around that. But what do we do about the average Joe Schmo who wants to keep down their glucose? What are some lifestyle things that we can do to make sure that we are keeping our blood sugar spikes at a minimum?
Okay. So first off, before we get into this, I know, we're going to talk about eat and balanced meals and things like that, but I want to mention very much skeletal muscle. So skeletal muscle is so important. Again, we take care of a lot of weight management patients. We use GLP-1s in our practice. For people who are using it, if you're losing weight, if you're maintaining weight, I cannot stress how important skeletal muscle mass is for your overall health. It's also extremely important for your basal metabolic rate, which is basically, that metabolic rate that you talk about. And it also can help control glucose. Skeletal muscle is a sponge for glucose in your body. Declines in skeletal muscle mass, whether it's just with natural age or whether it's because you're not eating right, you're not getting enough protein, you're not exercising, declines in skeletal muscle mass are the number one association with skin changes, immune function loss, overall health declines, an increased risk of morbidity from chronic diseases, like morbidity and mortality from chronic diseases like hypertension, diabetes, all the things we talk about. So if I can impress one thing upon you, I say this, I sound like a broken record, everybody that I talk to with weight management as well. If I can impress one thing upon you, it is educate yourself on skeletal muscle mass and hold on to your skeletal muscle mass as long as you can.
Yep.
Do actively eat a protein-based diet, and we'll do that another day. We're not going to get into protein today, but I'm just going to stress that point. Protein, we're going to talk about it in your meals in a moment. Put this number in your head. Start with 100 grams of protein a day. If you've never tracked protein a day in your life, just start trying to get 100 grams a day and reduce your glucose. Hold on to your skeletal muscle mass, and you're going to be a healthier person. Sorry for that tangent.
No, you're good. I'm going to actually piggyback off of that, because when he says skeletal muscle mass or your basic metabolic rate, so this basically means that the more muscle mass you have versus fat, the more calories that you're going to burn just sitting on the couch watching TV. If you have more muscle, if I have more muscle than Tim and Tim has more fat than muscle, I'm going to burn more calories at rest than he will. Once in a while, a few times a year, I will wear a CGM or a continuous glucose monitor. And this is just to watch what some foods do to me differently than my husband, and kind of just play around with what foods agree with me and don't, because everybody can have a different, average glycemic spike per meal. But nonetheless, I went for a run one day and I started to feel funny. Like it was a really long run. And as you're running and you're demanding that glucose, as you're running, your body will take it, or your muscles will just consume that glucose, for your exercise. And you could get that little bit of a hearing difference, and my vision started to get just a little bit weird. And I'm like, I feel like I'm definitely hypo. And sure enough, my thing beeped at me and I scanned myself and I was like 50, which is low, especially when I'm running. And it was crazy because I just kept running through it a little bit, because once again, your body will compensate, and whatever reservoirs it pulled from. And I just started to feel better. My ears started to perk up, my eyes, my vision got a little bit better, and I scanned myself again and I was already like up 75 or something, back to normal. So your body's incredible, and it will take and use what it wants. And especially when you're working out, your muscles are a sponge for the glucose.
And if you have glycogen stores in your body, we can dip into that too.
Yeah.
It's not our intention here to try to get into every metabolic process. Right. We really want to just sort of be able to discuss this on a level that anyone can understand if you're not super medical, but just understand your body's great at it. So Mia had asked, what can we do about this? You're trying to make some changes. First off, we've said it a million times, everything comes back to the diet, right? So for every meal, you definitely want to have protein based. In my opinion, you want to get your proteins, your good fats, and carbs are fine. We're not saying you can't have carbs. Hopefully you're not getting them from processed foods. Yeah. Hopefully you're getting them good, complex, real. And it's the order in which you eat them, right? You're big on that. For the most part, you want to eat your proteins and fats first, and then your carbohydrates can come at the end of the meal.
Fiber first, and then your protein and fats. Yep. So the theory of that, and once again, this isn't, if you're super healthy and you know that your levels are okay, is it going to be a super worry to manage the way that you eat on your plate? No. But if you're someone who is teetering that metabolic issue, or already are pre-diabetic or insulin resistance, or have some of these metabolic issues, this single-handedly can change everything. And I can also attest to this. When I was wearing my CGM, I would eat the two meals the same, one day after each other. The first time I would eat it however I wanted to, just kind of mix everything together. And then the second one I would do within order. So like he said, you want your fibers to go first. So like your green, your leafies, things that can cover and coat your stomach lining. It can help blunt that glycemic spike as well. Then followed by your protein and fats. So for example, let's say you had some broccoli. Yes, broccoli is still a carb, but it's more on the fiber side. So broccoli first, then maybe your steak. So your fats and your protein there. And then if you're ending with your complex carbs, that would be like a sweet potato. And if I changed the order in which I ate like I just said, it made a world of difference on my glycemic spike. And those patients do so much better, because every single meal is a huge hit for glycemic load. And if you're monitoring the way that you're even eating your foods, the same foods, just changing the order of which you eat them, you can have a major difference in your glycemic spikes.
Yeah, and definitely not to contradict you or get in the weeds at all, but I do think there's some discussion out there as to what's better, fiber first or protein first. Let's just say carbs last.
Yes, exactly.
Get your
Complex
proteins,
carbs
your
last.
fats, your fiber first. Just save your carbs for last, and you're going to do yourself a favor and probably reduce that spike after the meal.
Yeah, don't dwell on that one.
Yeah.
Like he said, carbs last, the rest will take care of itself.
Yep. And so then the next thing would be moving after meals. There's a lot of good research, right? Yep. Any kind of movement.
We were huge on this. And in fact, once the weather gets, I mean, it's getting a little bit nicer now, but in the summer, every single meal with our kiddos, we're done eating. Let's go out and take a walk. We'll take a walk around our farm or the block, wherever you live. It makes such a difference. Why? You're exercising. Your muscles are moving, which means your muscles are going to pull that glucose right immediately. It's going to say, I want this first. Your muscles essentially have like first dibs at things. It's just wants it. So if you're walking as you were after you ate a meal, it does wonders for not having that spike come up, and it just pulls it into the muscles and utilizes for what it does. Remember, it's detrimental when you have those chronic spikes up and down, because that is what is really detrimental to your body too. So the less that spike is and the more little waves that you have with your glycemic spike, the better that you're going to be.
I think of that like blood pressure. Imagine when your blood pressure is spiking high, and I'm trying to make this sound like pounding on the vessel wall. Same thing with glucose. Picture it the same way. When that glucose spikes up, it pounds on vessel walls, on your eyes, your kidneys, your heart. Think of it as just doing damage in that way. So you want to make that pound much lighter, a much less spike, Mia said.
Yeah.
Moving after meals is a great way to do it. It's super easy, and it's a great way to build relationships with your family, talk about the day. As functional medicine providers, we're big on that. Without a good social support system, without good relationships, without good sleep, which we're going to talk about in a minute, none of this other stuff works as well.
Yeah.
So just another good thing.
And talk about the why, especially with my kiddos. My little one, he knows right away because he's into making his own snacks. So if he goes to the pantry, he knows he needs a protein source, some fiber and, vegetables or fruit, like even for his snack. And he knows protein makes me grow big and strong. I need that in every meal that I have. And it's just teaching the why. That will also go significantly, such a long way with your kids. If you're struggling with that, teach them the why.
Yep. And so we just mentioned stress, managing stress. Remember cortisol levels, your adrenal axis, that all is going to affect your glucose metabolism as well.
For sure. You actually don't even need to consume a single meal to have your blood sugar spike if your cortisol plays a role in this. And this is another thing I read about a provider who kind of did her own study. She put CGMs on people that were playing video games. They weren't eating at all. They were just playing video games, and she would watch they would spike a big spike with their CGM playing a video game and during stressed times. And that's a cortisol spike. And mind you, these are people who are not eating a single thing of food. So that plays such a huge role. So things like mindful meditation or guided meditation, there's apps out there on Spotify. You can do it every night. We play one to kind of fall asleep with one. There's walking, exercise, of course, and things to reduce your stress load.
Yeah, definitely exercise. I tell people I don't run for exercise anymore. I run because that's kind of like me time.
Yeah.
That's my escape. We talked about prioritizing sleep. I mean, really try for, 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. I mean, at the very least, you have to be getting 6. I think 7 is probably the minimum for really good, healthy, restorative sleep. And then I'd just like to talk for one moment about some of the more, what you might call alternative or not as mainstream things that you can do. I'm not going to say that all of these directly affect glucose levels, but when you're thinking of whole body homeostasis, start thinking about things like red light therapy, cold therapy, whether you're doing cold plunges, taking cold showers, or cryo chambers at a local place. Grounding is really cool. We're going to probably do an episode about some of these at one point, but I like grounding. There's lots of other things out there, but the point is there are a lot of different ways to take care of your body, and that all comes into that stress, emotional, social regulation, which, again, I've said it before, that's not really built into the traditional Western medicine system right now. I hope it is in the future, but start making time for it. You don't need your doctor to tell you to work on your relationships, to get better sleep. To do these things. Listen to people like us for guidance and, do some research on your own.
The other thing that we tell our patients all the time is the time-restricted eating window. That's a huge one that can really help regulate glucose. Basically, I mean, if your body is always trying to break down food, it's not going to be able to do the other stuff that it needs to do, the cellular, wasting and detoxifying of your cells. So typically for our patients, we recommend about an 8 to 10 hour eating
This is
window.
intermittent fasting. She
Yeah,
said
intermittent
time-restricted
fasting.
eating. It's the same thing.
Yeah, time-restricted or intermittent fasting. But it's not like your true fasting where you're going, days or whatever on just water or nothing. So typically, we recommend that for our patients. Now, given our weight loss program, usually it's significantly easy to do because they're hitting their high protein goals. They feel fuller longer. Some of them have medication to assist them. So there's really a big picture with them and making it easier. But they all say that they do feel like that helps them with their brain fog, fatigue, mental clarity, better sleep. Because once again, I mean, if you eat a huge meal before bed and you try to sleep, your body's not going to work on going in your deep REM sleep. It's going to work on digesting the food that you just ate. So those little things, every single day can really make a big difference, especially in the long term. And give yourself some time. Give yourself a week or two. to dive into these things, and then a little bit longer. This isn't an overnight change. And the other thing I will say is when people try to change to big diets, like they're on a very high sugar diet and then they're going to almost a no or a low sugar diet, they can feel like crap. This isn't news. They can feel that brain fog, the fatigue, the headaches. They feel like they almost have the flu. And that is, I've mentioned this in their other podcasts, that's that die off of your the bad guts or the bad bugs in your microbiome dying off. And that's like an exotoxin release. So stick with it. It's not that you needed sugar in your life. It's just that those bugs are dying off, and you really are on your way to a healthier person. It just takes some time to get used to. And as you get through, it's easier than others, but given your baseline of where you start. But nonetheless, it's worth it. Your body will thank you.
I promise we will do an entire podcast on the microbiome at some point. We've only sort of mentioned it briefly in some of these, and it's hugely important. I mean, I heard someone say recently, we are not human, right? We're a bunch of different bacteria and viruses and parasites and protozoan, whatever we are, put together into this trillions of cells. And that's true. So remember, your gut, is like 90% of who you are emotionally, your thoughts, your cravings, your desires. It all comes from your gut. So you have to feed your gut good things. If you're giving it too much sugar, you're going to feed those bad bacteria and lead to some of these more negative outcomes. Same with one of our other episodes, we talked about seed oils. I mean, seed oils can definitely affect the gut, the bacteria that grow in your gut.
Yep.
So sort of just a quick recap as we're running out of time here today. Glucose is important, right? We need it in our body. We need to help our body regulate it. We cannot overload our body with it because our body will not be able to maintain it in a proper way over time. That's called homeostasis. Some very simple things that you can do is be conscious of what you're eating. So look at labels. Remove high fructose corn syrup from your diet. There's no need for it in any way, shape, or form. Make that a very rare treat if you feel like you need it. Reduce added sugar. Check all labels and look for things like added sugar. Reduce those amounts as much as you possibly can. And then, little things we talked about, the order in which you eat. Try to get those fibers, proteins first, complex carbs last. We talked about moving after you eat. It's very important to move so those sponges in your muscles soak up all of the glucose. We talked about emotions, stress, relationships, all of those things that aren't always coming up at your normal doctor visit, putting those things first, prioritizing your mental health, your emotional health, your spiritual health. And then finally, we talked about some alternative therapies, things like red light, cold therapies, grounding. I didn't even mention HBOT, but mild hyperbaric oxygen therapy. We have some cool studies we could talk about for how that controls glucose.
Yeah.
So there's a lot out there. This isn't meant to cover every single thing. It's meant to really get you thinking. Hopefully you research some on your own.
Yeah. Yep, I think that's a wrap, guys. All right, so just a reminder, this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not medical advice. It is not a substitute for professional care, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health routine. Remember that you have the power. Join us next week to get more knowledge.
And if you need more knowledge before that, please visit rixahealth.com. You can check out our website. If you need an appointment, please feel free to make it. Please, and share this podcast. Do a favor, get us around. We want lots of people to listen to this. We want to keep helping people. If you feel so inclined, please leave us a review and reach out to us for anything we can help you with.
Yep, send it to someone that you think can benefit. Thanks, guys.